Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down the tragic and complex story of Tatiana, the Siberian tiger who escaped her enclosure on Christmas Day 2007. It's a day that started with holiday cheer and ended in absolute terror.
So, how does a zoo's worst nightmare actually become a reality? Well, in this explainer, we're going to investigate the whole chain of events, from human behavior to some pretty serious institutional failures that led to a fatal catastrophe. Our story really begins on a holiday, right after closing time. The zoo should have been settling down for the night. Instead, it was the exact moment that all hell broke loose.
Just try to imagine getting that call. A tiger is loose, a visitor is dead, and two more are severely injured. To really understand how we got to this point, we need to rewind and look at the warning signs and, of course, the key players in this tragedy. Okay, first, let's meet Tatiana. She was a 4-year-old, 220-pound Siberian tiger, and she's at the very center of this story. And it's important to know, she wasn't always seen as an aggressive animal.
Yeah. See, what's really fascinating here is that there was a documented shift in her behavior. Just a year before this fatal incident, she actually attacked a zookeeper, leaving the woman with a permanently scarred arm. This wasn't just a random act. It was a huge red flag.
Now, let's bring in the other people at the enclosure that day. There were 3 young men, 17-year-old Carlos Sousa Jr. and 2 brothers, Amrit Paul and Kulbir Dhaliwal. And according to reports from that day, these guys weren't just watching the animals. Eyewitnesses said they were actively provoking them, shouting, throwing things. They were basically setting a very dangerous stage for what was about to happen. So here's the crucial question, right? How does a tiger actually get out of its enclosure? I mean, that's supposed to be impossible. Well, this is where that simmering aggression meets a critical, and I mean critical, design flaw. Investigators found concrete chips in Tatiana's paws, which tells us she scrambled and literally clawed her way up the grotto wall. And this is the number that changes everything. Investigators discovered that the wall of the tiger grotto was only 12.5 feet high. Now, this chart illustrates the problem perfectly. That wall was significantly below the minimum height recommended by zoo safety standards, which is 16 feet. We're talking 3.5 feet too short. That's not a small oversight. It's a catastrophe waiting to happen. So once Tatiana was free, she went straight for the group. And the consequences were immediate and absolutely tragic for Carlos Sousa Jr. So with one person dead, the 2 injured brothers, they run for their lives. And what happens next is just a cascade of confusion and missteps. So they're bleeding, they're frantic, and they make it to the only potential safe spot nearby, the zoo cafe. But of course, it was locked. So they just started screaming for help. And this is where a crucial misunderstanding happens. A worker inside the cafe calls 911, but they don't say anything about a tiger. They think the screaming is from someone who is mentally unstable. This one detail completely changes the nature of the emergency response. You can see on this timeline how that miscommunication, combined with the zoo's own lockdown procedure, created a critical delay. It took a full 25 minutes from the escape until armed police were finally on the scene. 25 minutes. So when police finally did arrive, they were faced with an incredibly dangerous and tense situation. I mean, something that you just can't prepare for. They found Tatiana literally sitting right next to one of the bleeding Dhaliwal brothers. They knew they had to act, but firing their weapons carried this immense risk of hitting the victim himself. So here's what they did in those final moments. First, they hesitate. Then, they try to distract the tiger to draw her away. It actually works for a second, but then she turns and moves right towards the officers. And at that point, they had no choice. They opened fire. In the end, the incident claimed 2 lives, Carlos Sousa Jr. and Tatiana the tiger, and it left 2 other young men forever scarred, both physically and, you have to imagine, psychologically. In the aftermath, it didn't take long for the truth to come out. The San Francisco Zoo publicly admitted that the moat wall had been far, far too low, well below accepted safety standards. So it brings us to the final question. When captivity turns deadly, where does the blame really lie? Is it with the provocateurs, the animal, or the institution that failed to keep them safely apart? This tragic story is just a stark reminder of the complex responsibilities we have when the worlds of wild animals and humans collide.